From a disturbing cave cannibal more horrifying than Hannibal Lecter to an ancient prison for witches, here are 10 of the creepiest discoveries ever. Number 10. The Cave Cannibal. Sawney Bean is one of the most gruesome figures in Scottish history. He was a cannibal who lived in a cave and was significantly more terrifying than even Hannibal Lecter. According to local Scottish legend, the Bean clan, of whom Sawney was naturally the leader, went on a reign of terror that lasted 25 years. During that time, they killed and ate around 1,000 people while hiding in a sea cave on the west coast of Scotland. But unfortunately, or fortunately depending on which way you look at it, Sawney Bean may not have actually existed. Dr. Louise Yeoman, a Scottish historian, claims that nobody has actually been able to officially declare Sawney Bean as a real person. Accounts of when he lived stretched from the early 1400s all the way to the turn of the 17th century. There are huge historical inaccuracies with the story. Legend has it that Sawney and the Bean clan lived in a cave that would be hidden each night by the high tide. They raised 14 children and 32 grandchildren, all of them born out of incest. In the end, it took 400 men and a pack of bloodhounds to track down and eradicate them. The truth is, though, that historians have disputed the existence of Sawney Bean and nobody can agree. To this day, no physical evidence has ever been found that this lunatic or his sick family ever existed. Number 9. The Ghost Ship. There's a mysterious Russian cruise ship called MV Lyubov Orlova. The ship was named after a famous Russian movie star and was designed to be a luxury vessel for luxury passengers. It had a long history of problems. She was first built in 1976, then renovated in 1999 and again in 2002. Then in 2006, the ship ran aground in Antarctica. In 2010, she was seized by Canada because of outstanding debts of over $200,000. The vessel sat at port for 2 years before it was finally condemned. The ship was to be broken up and sold for parts, but it was during the transfer of the ship from Canada to the Dominican Republic that the line connecting the ship to the tugboat snapped. The cruise ship drifted away, and a larger vessel from Transport Canada was able to pull it away from coastal drilling rigs. But they only took the vessel as far as open water, at which point she was cut loose and allowed to simply float away. It floated across the seas of the world with absolutely no guidance or steering and apparently is now home to hordes of cannibal rats. Some reported spotting the vessel off the coast of Scotland in 2016. It was also spotted off the coast of Ireland, and some say they've seen it sailing along the California coastline. The MV Lyubov Orlova is now one of the world's most mysterious ghost ships, populated by hungry rats with nothing else to eat other than each other. Number 8. Missouri Ghost Town. A user on TikTok made a very creepy discovery in Missouri. They came across a subdivision filled with creepy abandoned mansions. This place is called the Indian Ridge Resort, or at least it would have been called that if it had ever been completed. It was meant to be a huge development, pushing almost $2 billion. There were to be shopping malls, a marina, a huge hotel, and the second largest indoor water park in the world. But none of the projects ever got off the ground, primarily because of the 2008 financial crisis. All that remains of the ambitious resort town today is a spooky subdivision of half-built mansions, of which nobody is living in. But trust me, you wouldn't want to squat in this place. It's downright haunting. The mansions are overgrown with weeds, there could be dangerous animals living in the undergrowth, and who knows what kinds of ghosts have moved into the buildings. It's better to enjoy the creepy scenery from the roadside without getting too close. Would you like to check out this ghost town? Let me know in the comments below, and if you're liking this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe buttons. Number 7. A toothy tumor. Deep in the dark depths of a Spanish necropolis, archaeologists discovered a very creepy artifact. What they found was a tumor made out of teeth stuck inside the remains of an ancient Roman who died sometime during her 30s. The calcified tumor was stuck inside of her pelvis. It was a clump of bone, deformed with at least 4 teeth embedded inside of it. This lady died 1600 years ago. She probably had a pretty rough time at the end of her life, considering she had what we know today as an ovarian teratoma. In other words, it's a tumor of the ovaries. These tumors come from germ cells, the same cells that form human eggs and create your bones, teeth, and your hair. Even in modern times, developing a tumor built out of teeth and hair and bone is very rare. This poor woman is the first time that scientists have seen such a tumor in the ancient world. But nobody knows who she was. We know she lived at a time when the Roman Empire was dying and when the barbarians were moving into the territory. However, she was really a nobody, buried in an unmarked grave in the dark hole of a Spanish necropolis. Number 6. The worm with 100 butts. Scientists have come across a very strange worm. Not just strange, but insanely creepy. This worm has 100 butts, and each butt is able to grow its own set of eyes and its own brain. This seems completely crazy, but it's 100% true. According to Live Science, R. multicaudata is a type of segmented worm belonging to a family of about 1,000 species. But this is only one of two which has something known as a branching body. The worm acts almost like a fungus. The worm grows offshoots of itself, branching out as it gets bigger. Each branch ends in a butt. Then, when the worm needs to reproduce, each butt grows its own eyes and a brain. The branches will then detach from the main body of the worm. Think of it as the creepiest and most disturbing Hydra-type monster on the planet. Scientists have known about these worms for a while, but it wasn't until recently that a new study exposed the strange truths about their anatomies. Still, they have more to figure out about how they circulate blood throughout their bodies and how their weird digestive system works. Number 5. The mummy in the apartment. Police were recently called to an apartment in France after a mummified body of an elderly man was discovered by the landlord. According to Newsweek, he'd already been dead for 11 years. He'd been trapped inside his apartment so long that he literally turned into a mummy. The only way police could date how long he'd been there was by checking the expiry dates on the food in the fridge and comparing it to the man's mail. You're probably wondering how someone managed to stay dead in their apartment for 11 years. He must have had rent being paid automatically, meaning the money just kept coming out of his account. It was probably when he finally ran out of funds that his landlord got angry, banged on the door, and was eventually forced to break the thing down. Unfortunately, we don't know exactly how the man died in the first place. He was old, so that may have had something to do with it. As for why the man turned into a mummy, authorities believe that because the windows were shut and there was no proper ventilation, the air just kinda dried him out. Number 4. Witch Prison. In the Scottish city of Aberdeen, there's a chapel that dates back to the 15th century. Inside the chapel, historians discovered an iron ring set into a stone pillar. The ring is believed to be physical evidence of the Scottish city's extremely dark and ghoulish past. It may have been used back when the chapel doubled as a prison for witches. It was probably used during the Great Witch Hunt of 1597, in which 23 women and 1 man were executed after being accused of practicing witchcraft. According to Arthur Winfield, project leader for the restoration of the chapel, the ring at first looks quite innocent. There's nothing spectacular about it. However, Arthur says it's a genuine artifact that proves the church was at one point equipped to be a witch prison. The accused witches were kept either in the stone vault or in the steeple. Neither place would have been comfortable or warm, especially throughout the winter while the alleged witches awaited their trial. Considering some of them were kept up in the spire, they would have suffered a miserable cold. Some may have welcomed the execution when it finally came. Contrary to popular belief, witch hunting wasn't actually done by mobs with pitchforks. It was instead done by royal commission. It was almost always the king who ordered witch hunts and witch trials and executions. There are still city records that go back to 1597 in which the city recorded the costs of the iron rings and shackles needed to imprison the witches, and the costs of the rope and wood and tar that was ultimately used to burn them at the stake, with all of these supplies being charged to the king. Number 3. The Enfield Horror. The Enfield Horror, also sometimes known as the Enfield Poltergeist, is one of the most famous supernatural entities ever documented. The Enfield Horror was also the inspiration for the movie The Conjuring 2, if you're familiar with that. The real case of the Enfield Horror involved a young girl who many believe was possessed by a demon. Those who witnessed Peggy Hodgson's daughter during the possession saw furniture move through the air and objects levitating on their own. They also heard inhuman voices and felt the temperature drop to almost become freezing. Peggy Hodgson went to the police after strange things started happening in her home. The police told her it was not a matter for them to investigate, but Peggy and her family would go on to be haunted for 18 months. At one point, the Daily Mirror sent a paranormal investigator named Maurice Gross from the Society for Psychical Research to investigate. He witnessed at least 2,000 separate incidents of paranormal activity during his stay at the house. Janet Hodgson was only 11 when she was possessed. She would be sent into a trance, she would speak in a deep and demonic voice, and she sometimes claimed to be the ghost of a man named Bill Wilkins. Bill Wilkins was even proved later on to have once lived in the house, but died of a hemorrhage while relaxing in the living room. Janet eventually got better, and her and her sister are still alive and well today. Janet's sister recently told People magazine that the haunting has stayed with them for their whole life. To this day, nobody knows what exactly the Enfield Horror was, where it came from, or why it abruptly left. Number 2. The A3 Ghost Crash. On December 11, 2002, the police in England received a call that a car had lost control, drove off the A3 highway and crashed. But when officers went to investigate, there was no vehicle. They figured someone had maybe made the whole thing up, but the witnesses were adamant that they had seen the crash with their own eyes. So the police searched a little harder. 20 yards from the scene of the crash, they found the remains of a brutally smashed car buried inside the undergrowth. Within the car was the skeleton of a man. Here's where things get spooky. The car's lights were off, the battery had been dead for quite some time, and the body was already decomposed. The crash probably happened in July, 5 months before it was ever found. The driver was only 21 years old and had been thought missing. But the strangest part of the story is that witnesses saw the car crash into the bushes 5 months after it had already happened. This had led some to speculate that what they actually witnessed was a replay of time, like a ghostly deja vu. The ghost crash allowed them to lead the police to the wrecked vehicle and the body of the deceased. Otherwise, he may never have been found. Number 1. Secret Door. Lindsay Grummett owns a house that dates back about 150 years. While renovating her home, she came across one of the creepiest things that any homeowner can find. She had just recently purchased the property a few months prior and was not expecting to find herself in the middle of a horror movie. The discovery was made on the platform in the middle of the stairs. Between the flights of stairs going up and the flight of stairs going down, she found a door that appeared to have absolutely no purpose. The door didn't look like it would go anywhere. It was also partially covered up as if someone was hoping nobody would ever find it again. And to make matters even creepier, the door did not have a handle. Luckily for Lindsay, she didn't find any dead bodies or creeping peepers behind the door. Instead, there were boards of timber and a set of stairs that didn't go anywhere. She never did find out why the door was made, seemingly without purpose, or why there was a set of stairs that had been blocked off with wood. And to be honest, the best thing she could do at this point would be to cover the door and forget any of it ever happened. Thanks so much for watching. What's the creepiest thing you've ever discovered? Let me know in the comments down below, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already.